بله بله بله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم.
السلام عليكم.
Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim wa arz salam. Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends, dear colleagues, I have the honor of moderating the first panel after the opening of this great IPIS event discussing international law under assault. We have a fantastic panel that I'm going to introduce to you in just a minute. Before doing so, I want to basically say that as someone, and many of you will experience the same, who is exposed to international discussions and debates, depending on where you are in the world, I think there is agreement that the international order is undergoing major challenges. But there are disagreements over who is assaulting international law, who is responsible for disorder in the world, and depending on where you are in the world, you will receive different answers. And I basically want to use the conversation with a wonderful panel of distinguished experts, internationally very diverse, but also in terms of professions very diverse, to speak a bit about, to make a bit sense of how can we deal with this difficult situation in which we find the international order and international law in general. And I really want to try and not become fatalistic and too negative, and to, with the help of our distinguished panel, try to find a few thoughts on how we can turn things into a more positive future. I have a spectacular panel, as I told you, with very limited time. So what we are going to do is to have a bit of a conversation on stage, and then we will try towards the end to have 2 or 3 questions from the audience before we have concluding remarks. I want to start introducing this panel. To my immediate left, we have Dr. Manal Redhwan. She is an advisor to the Honorable Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and a very prominent figure, I may say, in the different diplomatic efforts that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is currently undergoing. We have His Excellency Khalil Shir Gholami, Director General of IPIS with us, whom all of you had the pleasure, or most of you had the pleasure of already meeting last evening. We have George Katrougalos, I'm very sorry for bumping into your name, a UN expert for promoting democratic and equitable international order, and the Honorable former Foreign Minister of Greece. We have Pierre-Emmanuel Dupont, senior lecturer at the Institut Catholique de Vendee in France. We have Andrea Margeletti, who is the founder and chairman of CeSI in Rome, a Center for International Studies. And last but not least, we have Vincent Cassard, the representative of the International Committee for the Red Cross here in Iran. So as you see, we have a very diverse group with a huge topic, very limited time, but we will do the best to have a lively conversation about the topic of this conference and this panel. And I may start with you, Dr. Manal. As I mentioned very briefly, you are very much active in the various diplomatic efforts that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is undertaking. And I want to start with a rather personal question, if I may, and that is, when you deal with the different diplomatic challenges that you lead conversations on, what is it that concerns you most when it comes to international order, international law, and what is it that gives you a bit of hope? So let us have the glass half empty and half full at the same time. Maybe a few thoughts from you at the beginning of our conversation.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much for the Iranian Foreign Ministry, for IPIS, for inviting me again here. It's a pleasure to be in Tehran, and a pleasure to listen to His Excellency Minister Arabji just now, and to be here with you on this panel and with very esteemed colleagues. I was promised 15 minutes of an opening remark, but I think we will forgo that. I like your question because I think it puts us right at the center of our role as diplomats and trying to shape policy and what to come. The most challenging, I would say personally, would be that when I hear narratives and when I hear statements about trying to figure out who is the aggressor. It's like there is a competition over who is the would-be hegemon, who is the most violent, who is the most challenging to the international order. And I will tell you why this is challenging, because I believe in every situation, perceptions are extremely important. And once we are put in a defensive mode, we lose so much of our agency actually to shape and reshape the circumstances. So I think that is not the right approach. Coupled with that, of course, the huge lack of knowledge that for some reason is increasing. It is very true now, it's not just a slogan, that with social media and the amount of information that we are flooded with on a daily basis, yet there is still a lack of understanding. There is still a lack of problematizing what we see and taking many perceptions for granted. So that is very challenging, because you enter into a mode of, no, but yes, you did this, but this person did that, and it becomes very defensive. And you lose the power of delving deep into the issue and trying to find out what could be the solutions. It's an either-or approach, which is never helpful in diplomacy or mediation. At the same time, there's also a learning curve that is very much needed, for one to get into, to scratch the surface and go deep into the issue. What is hopeful is that there is a realization that no matter how much force is used, or how much belligerence is used, or how much hegemonic ambitions that any actor tries to pursue in this region and beyond, it is very clear that this is not the right way, that this is failed, and this will continue to fail. So this opens up a space, I think, to revisit and to re-understand, and I would encourage to even the reflection is also about self and other, and how we can transform this relationship.
Yes, I think that's a very good point to end on initially. In fact, you're inviting everyone to think about how to share the burden of turning things into a more positive, more constructive setting, which obviously is at times very difficult. And with that, I want to come to you, Dr. Khalil. Very difficult in light of what just happened in this country only 5 months ago. But again, here, similar to what I asked Dr. Manal, on the one hand, what concerns us here has been the events of the summer. At the same time, what could make us hopeful is that dialogue is continuing, that conversations are continuing. But maybe if I ask you for a few thoughts on the Iranian perspective now after what has happened. On the one hand, being betrayed, diplomacy being betrayed. On the other hand, being active in trying to do diplomatic outreach, seek dialogue. Where do you currently see the debates here? And what is the new self-confidence that Dr. Sajjalpur was discussing with Foreign Minister Araghchi? Where do you see things currently in the debates you're witnessing here?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Adnan. We were supposed to have the pleasure of having Dr. Behzad Saberi Ansari, who is a prominent international law expert, for this panel. And unfortunately, at the very last minute, we were informed that for an urgent matter, he needs to cancel his participation. So, first of all, we are really missing Behzad here. Well, with regard to your very interesting question, what has happened here in Iran is a laboratory of the so-called erosion of international, let's say, law-based order. This is the fact that, international law was established to do something. It mattered because of the fact that the human being reached to this conclusion, and there was a consensus-based understanding that we need to have international law to contain power, because of the fact that power could have destructive, to be as an instrument that could be used constructively or destructively, based on the intentions, of those who have the power in their hand. What has happened is the fact that, little by little, and unfortunately in maybe last decade, we are witnessing some sort of a reverse in the trend or the course of history, which is a reverse to the very logic of the early 20th century, which is the zero-sum game, which is, some sort of, leveraging power and weaponizing power for your own interests, neglecting other players' interests, which is the case now in international system. Meanwhile, the fact that we are here, the fact that we are gonna continue these talks, prove the fact that international order still and international law still matters.
Yeah.
We need to understand the fact that the narrative matters, as Manal mentioned, the fact that how we perceive what is the best mechanism for containing power in the benefit of human being, for our common destiny. This is the very, heart of the matter and the very heart of the problem. If we can contain power in the benefit of everybody, a win-win game based on, considering the benefits and interests of everybody. And when you're gonna consider the interests of everybody, you should have some regulations. You should have some sort of consensus-based regulations or rules. And that's international law. What we need now is a return to the very heart and very logic of international law, which is containing power in the benefit of everybody. What happened in Iran was, as I just mentioned, was a very interesting laboratory of this unfortunate, let's say, and very destructive trend of neglecting international law in the benefit of some specific players. Yeah. We need to return to the very heart of the diplomacy, very heart of the international law, and still there are hopes. There are many countries, especially those countries, the so-called global south, that are gonna, preserve the benefit of having this consensus-based mechanism between all human beings, and we are hopeful that we can do.
And interestingly, from what you said, we can again come with the glass half empty, glass half full notion that we say international law under assault is obviously a very negative thing, but if it is under assault, it still exists. So there is still international law, and the question is, how can it be kept alive, re-strengthened? And this is where I want to come to you, Your Excellency, Mr. Katrougalos. As someone who works with the UN now, with a very noble goal to promote democratic and equitable international order, what is the status of the UN? I mean, it's a very broad question, but what is the status of the UN currently promoting international law? One could argue it has been significantly weakened like never before, but at the same time we can say, if there was ever a time since its foundation that the UN has to get its act together again, it's now. How would you see it?
You are very right to say that. You must have in mind what the second General Secretary of the United Nations has said about the role of the organization. He said that United Nations are not here to bring heaven into earth, but to avoid earth to become hell. And what is the new element in the international relations? It is not the American military interventionism. This is a constant characteristic. The anthem, the hymn of the US Marines say that from the rooms of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, from Mexico to Libya, the US Army is there. But in the old narrative, the United States were there to defend democracy, human rights, international legality. The new element is that they distance themselves from the United Nations, from the current international order. It is very, very emblematic what Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of the State, has said at his nomination speech, at his hearing before the US Senate. He said, and I quote, word by word, "The current international order is not just obsolete, it is a weapon used against us," unquote. This is not a sign of strength. This is a sign of weakness. This shows the erosion of the American hegemonism in the international relations. And why we have this erosion? It is not so much the decline of the West, but the rise of the rest, to borrow a quip. We live now in a multipolar world. It is not anymore a zero-sum game, as in a bipolar world. In a bipolar world, states must choose sides, and the gains of the one camp are the loss of the other. This is not the case anymore. Just look at our area in the Middle East. Two of the closest allies of the United States, Emirates and Egypt, have joined BRICS. Saudi Arabia is thinking about that. India, in order to describe this new trend, has abandoned its old, let's say, motto about non-alignment, and they speak about multi-alignment. The deputy foreign minister, the deputy prime minister of Indonesia have said it even more, let's say, flourishly. From now on, we are all politically polygamous. The states have not suddenly become multi-amorous. This stance reflects, first of all, that we are orienting to a different international order, more balanced. Although we see signs of, let's say, lawlessness, Israel is the classical case, not just the attack, the genocide in Gaza, but as the foreign minister has said, its attack on 7 of his neighboring countries. However, a new paradigm is rising because of the rise of the global south, but also because of the fact that there is also a south in the global north. I mean by that the majorities of the populations in what we call the global north, the west, have basically the same interests as in the global south. It's just the 1%, the super rich of the populations in our part of the world that are profiting from the globalization. And there is an additional reason for optimism. People's demonstration have ended the war in Vietnam, together, of course, with the heroic struggle of Vietnamese people. And it is the massive demonstrations for the rights of the Palestinian people that they have made some countries in Europe partially to shift and to speak now about Palestinian statehood. So my message is that we should defend the United Nations system, first of all, because it is the only ecosystem we have, both for the protection of human rights, but also for peace and development, and having confidence in ourselves, in the power of the people to push their states to more just, to more fair policies. Thank you.
It gives me, as if this was choreographed, but it's obviously not, but it gives me the perfect assist for me to pass the ball on to Dr. Dupont. You mentioned the power of people, or the presence of people in the streets. And when we speak about international order and how states act, we speak about laws, rules, sometimes force. But there is also something else, which are norms and values, convictions, beliefs. This is where people sometimes demand from their political leaders, what about all the norms and values that we all used to believe in? Now, if we shift to, well, France is arguably still South Europe, but not that much to the south like Greece. But if we now start to speak about in the lack of law and rules-based order, where are values in all of this? Where would you see European debates in this realm, where values can still be held up to call on those who have lost commitment to law and order?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. In fact, it seems that there has been in Europe, what can be witnessed from most governments across Europe, is a shift from a concern for the promotion of international law, which is and remains and is supposed to remain a cornerstone of EU foreign policy and has been since the outset. And it's the promotion, I mean, of human rights and democracy worldwide is one of the stated objectives of the common foreign and security policy in the EU. Despite this, I mean, recent years have witnessed a trend towards selective application of those rules, and this has been particularly visible when the aggression against Iran occurred in June this year. It is especially striking to notice the difference in the reactions of most European countries at the time when this event occurred, with comparison to their reaction when a prior strike which was very similar against peaceful civilian nuclear infrastructure occurred 45 years ago, against and committed by the same regime against Iraq. At that time, in June 1981, most European countries, and it was also a major trend within the international community at large, condemned outright this attack, did not accept the justification alleged by the Israeli regime of the invocation of self-defense, and insisted on the fact that this attack on peaceful nuclear infrastructure was totally unlawful, and in addition to that was of such a nature as to imperil the future of the nuclear safeguards regime. And this led to the adoption in June 1981 of a unanimous resolution in the Security Council condemning this attack. And by comparison, the positions expressed by European diplomacies in general, and this was also reflected at the J7 at that time, are in stark contrast, and it leads to the opinion that in some cases, aggression could be justified. So it leads to a finding that double standards are applied in that matter, which is very much a matter of concern, especially for the future of the non-proliferation regime, not also for the maintenance of international peace and security in general.
Yes, I think you pointed out that the different cornerstones of European policy haven't really been abided by, and that the people you refer to, Your Excellency, had also their say in protesting against that. If I may move to you, Dottore Margeletti, do you see any chance that the presence of people in the streets, the different protests we saw, and I think those were particularly strong in some points in time in Italy. I don't want to reduce you to being a representative of Italy, but it was just...
It will be a huge honor, but I'm not a representative of my country.
No, I mean...
We are people from the embassy here. I'm almost a representative because I'm also advisor of Italian Ministry of Defense, but I'm here as a chairman of CeSI. That's more than enough for me.
Okay, but it gives me the justification to demand from you as the chairman of CeSI to help us maybe understand how do you see could this gap possibly between European policymakers and people who are demanding more values and norms, how can that be bridged?
So thank you for the question, and first of all, let me thank you, IPIS, for the invitation. It's an institute in which my institute has a long tradition of cooperation. Let me say hello to my friend and distinguished colleague, Professor Sajanpour. We know since about 4 or 5 years ago. But I want to take as an example what the quote that you started about the bottle, half or full. So starts about the perception, because your perception is half full, my perception could be half empty. And I wanted to make an example that I've seen a few minutes ago. There was the interesting video that you show here before the start of our meeting. And the first quote was the president of US, Trump, says, "We fight to win." Everyone fight to win. Everyone. But the first people, just to be clear, that said that we need to fight to win, was a Chinese, was a general and philosopher that was Sun Tzu, 2,600 before Trump. Just to be honest, regarding Sun Tzu, obviously. The second point is, and this is so important, that if we must have, everyone must respond to the rules, you, me, her, everyone, we must be honest. If not, we want that only our enemies or our adversary could say, I had to respect our rules, not our friends. I would like to see image, like I've seen the image of a president of the United States Trump jiggling and dancing of President Putin. Because we are facing a war in Europe in which every day, Russian drones, Russian missiles, Russian soldiers murders hundreds of innocent civilian, not military, civilian people. As a political analyst, I never work with opinions. I can't be paid for my opinion. My opinion is zero. As a political analyst, I work with facts. 2 + 1 + 1 makes 2. We can like or dislike, but it's a matter of fact. Tomorrow, it will be Monday. We could like or dislike, but it's a matter of fact. That's the key. So to be honest, maybe you don't have enough time to put Putin as well. Okay. Second point, the rule of people. All of us, we are people. But we must be, because we have a responsibility to speak in front of them, less romantic in our approach. The square, the people on the street, things, generally speaking, and every one of us in the past, at least me, we had black hair. We grew up, the color of our hair changed, and also changed our experience, changed our way to see the world. It's experience, and then you do experience through the battle that you lost, not the battle that you won.
Yep.
And the people on the street thinks through the stomach. Is a matter of fact. The decision makers had to speak and had to think with a brain. Unless every 15 minutes, your government, my government, every government had to change mind because the people on the street decide something else. Obviously, we need to, and I think also that nowadays, the situation in the world, because we are living at the end of the Cold War, we had some events after the Cold War that changed the paradigm, is that we can't compare, the romantic and heroic days of a struggle against the Vietnam War that was well before the 68, the revolution in Europe, the left revolution, when they say, put the fantasy on the power, to what happened today. It's a different people. We don't have extreme left, we don't have left anymore, at least in European countries. Mm-hmm. So maybe this kind of people are less ideology, but more minded. And so I can tell you that obviously the people on the square makes an influence of a government. Mm-hmm. But not necessary. This is a difference between half full, half empty. Not necessary because they are right, but especially because they are voters.
Of course, there's
and every politician wants to be re-elected. And so every politician now had to take count about what the people on the street says, but doesn't mean that every time that the people makes statement, people is right.
Okay. No, but very important hints you gave us, and I also believe that your emphasis on fact-driven approaches is also something that can help us out of perceptions that sometimes you cannot delegitimize the perception of somebody else, but maybe facts help you. And facts have a lot to do with what happens on the ground, and I think a few people are more knowledgeable than people working in the humanitarian field about what is happening on the ground. And this leads me to you, Monsieur Cassard. You're the representative of the International Committee of the Red Cross here in Iran, and the Red Cross is nowadays often in the news when there are exchanges of hostages and prisoners, and we only get a glimpse of the type of work your organization has to do with all what we are discussing in a rather conceptual, think tank, policy-driven conversation. How is it for someone who is more on the practitioner side, if I may say, working on humanitarian aid? How do you experience this assault on international law or this crisis that we're talking about?
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to warmly thank IPIS and the MFA for the invitation. I think it's a critical topic, unfortunately, because I still see the glass quite empty at the moment. I would like to highlight something that is very closely related to what we discussed about the architecture of peace and security, related to the justification of war and legality of wars. That's the parallel development of international humanitarian law that came after the Second World War, and based on the violence of the Second World War, it was the objective was really to put together a number of rules to organize how wars are conducted, and mainly to put limits, red lines, to a number of activities and acts that were prohibited. It's mainly a protective body of law for the protection of civilians, for the protection of prisoners of war, or for the protection of people who do not take part in hostilities. And today, we are living a paradox, and we are as well as at a cross line. I think it's a body of laws that is more unanimously accepted. There is, I don't know any states that haven't signed, so it's a unanimously agreed body of laws that are important for states. At the same time, we see an increased disrespect for this body of law and appalling violence in a number of conflicts today. And I don't want to go through a terrible list of examples. Obviously, there was examples in Palestine that was affected. Just recently, even though it's been going on for 2 years, we have seen terrible violence in Sudan that is unacceptable. Nobody should die when they are in a hospital. Nobody should be killed when they are leaving their home for fear of their security as a civilian. So there is this paradox, is that states, a number of states, most of them have accepted these rules. They have signed. They have agreed that their role is to respect this rule and to enforce or ensure respect. So the responsibility lies very much in states. So the situation today, when I say we are at a crossroad, it's because we see this increased disrespect. On our side, as the International Committee of the Red Cross, we're trying to fulfill our role, which is on one side to provide protection, assistance to people affected by conflict, but on the other side as well to support states in the faithful implementation of international humanitarian law. I keep referring to states. Obviously, you can mention that in a number of conflicts, you have non-state actors that have a responsibility as well, but here I would like to focus on states because we are in the legal framework that was set up after Second World War. So that's the empty side of the glass. And we are trying to find solutions to increase the effectiveness of the support we give, because by supporting states, visibly we fail sometimes, or states fail to fulfill their responsibility, because states have the responsibility to conduct inquiry, to prosecute, and to punish violations of IHL. There is no international structure. There are some, but they are with limited implication. I mean, there is the ICC, so there is an international system that is built on the existing state's responsibility. It's basically there to cover the gaps in the state system. So then, just for the good news, and maybe I can develop after if there's time, is we are trying to develop a stronger political will from states. Why we call it a political will to respect IHL is because states have this responsibility and have this power. We need the states to be involved. And it was launched, an initiative was launched in 2024. It's a 2 years initiative, it's quite short, where in fact 6 initial states, it was France, Jordan, Brazil, China, Kazakhstan and South Africa, together with the ICRC, launched a call for a political engagement toward respect for IHL. This was based on this situation where we saw limited progress, and we needed to find practical solutions which were accepted and coming from states, because giving lessons is not enough and giving advice is not enough. So in a way, the good news, because there is some, is that from 6 now we have 130 states that have been involved in the process. There's been a number of thematic discussions, and they will continue, they are continuing right now. There's a number of discussions that are ongoing and culminate in 2026 in a summary of what should be practical, realistic, implementable measures that have been drafted by these states. It's about prevention of the violence, it's about the specific protection of hospitals, or it's about as well discussions on the role of respect for IHL and peace, because we believe that respecting the rule is a step toward the solution for the war. And just my last word, because otherwise I could talk a lot. I think the humanitarian law, or law of armed conflict, is a law that has to tackle an impossible balance. On the one hand, you have military objectives, and on the other hand, our common humanity and the respect for individuals. And it's a balancing exercise, because it starts from an exceptional situation. There is a conflict, and based on the fact that there is a conflict, there is an exceptional capacity to target military targets and to strike this balance. And it's really a difficult balance, and that's why it's important that there is this common discussion, because finally it's about our common humanity, and what we see today is really this respect for common humanity is really, I think, going down, and we hope that the dialogue could be one step toward a better implementation. That's my full path.
Thank you so much for all of you to really spend some thoughts on the half glass full. And I really want to emphasize, when I ask for some positivity, this is not meant to whitewash the difficulty of the times we're in, but really to prevent to become too negative, cynical, fatalistic, and lose any hope. And I think one important aspect of the conversation Foreign Minister Araghchi had with Dr. Sajjadpour just minutes ago was when the conclusion of Foreign Minister Araghchi was the need for diplomacy, and that this is now what is needed more than ever. So, Dr. Manal, I think you've come a long way with Saudi Arabia's co-lead in the global coalition for the implementation of the two-state solution to achieve Palestinian statehood. Amidst all the grim things that happened in the past 2 years, this seems to be a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. So what would make you confident that the re-emergence of diplomatic approaches is thinkable? There's prospects for that, in really also from a bit of the experience of the work you've been involved in, or basically overall observations you've had in this respect.
I want to start by saying it's good to look at the glass half full or half empty, or how, where the watermark is. But it's also, I think, equally important to also understand that we have responsibility to fill the glass.
True.
We cannot. It's not just things are not just taken for granted as they are. We are co-shapers of our reality. And if we just try to observe and to blame others and not to take this agency seriously, I think the glass will continue to be not in our favor. On the Global Alliance for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution, I think it's one of the not only one of the bright examples of how the region can take responsibility, the Saudi Arabia and of course the Arab and the OIC contact group on Gaza who were leading on this effort, along with France and other important European countries like Spain that played a very important role, and even Italy and others, to put back not we talk about the realization of the Palestinian state because as far as we're concerned, there is a Palestinian state. There is a state of Palestine. It is that we need to enforce the realization of this Palestinian state. And here it can become a very abstract exercise, and some actually were leveling some criticism against Saudi Arabia and against this effort, that you are talking about the realization of a Palestinian state while genocide is happening and while the Palestinians are being killed every day in Gaza, and the Palestinian state is facing an existential threat in the West Bank. And so this, and also the other criticism I have to say is that this is an exercise where people can feel good about themselves. So they are, participant in this. They could recognize a Palestinian state, but what would that do to affect what is happening on the ground? And it's a challenging question and very legitimate to level these, doubts. However, I think the push that created the New York Declaration and the having 144 votes in favor of that declaration, and seeing that for the first time in many years, if not in many decades, we have a full map of where do we get from ending the war, ending the genocide, to realizing a Palestinian state, to actually achieve a full regional integration and participate in this maintenance of peace and security. At least to have that and to have all of these voices that have not only committed to it, but also promised implementation, because the word implementation was extremely important in our in this effort. I think adds to this glass. It is now almost empty. So if we can have a few drops, that's I think that is a welcome sign. It is not enough. It is absolutely not enough. And we need to also protect ourselves against countries feeling good about themselves just on diplomatic initiative, and they have to translate these commitments, especially those countries that decided to recognize the state of Palestine. They have to take that recognition seriously through, of course, legal norms, and now that they have an obligation to prevent anything that would jeopardize the realization of the state of Palestine. So there are legal now and normative responsibilities that they have to adhere to. Where we go from here, it's a very difficult situation. It's a very challenging situation. We are, of course, very grateful that we are able to achieve a ceasefire. We hope that the ceasefire continues. The ceasefire does not mean the absence of conflict and the absence of continued attacks and continued killing and belligerence on behalf of Israel. But I think what is now very clear to us, even after this complete lack of adherence to any rules or any norms, and this feeling of complete impunity, that anything can be done with full impunity, no matter what ICC, no matter what ICJ, no matter what the international system. Actually, it has delivered now for the very first time in a long time. I think what is extremely important is that none of the objectives that Israel has claimed that it wants to pursue has been fulfilled. And at the end of the day, even the release of the hostages, even the addressing of these concerns that Israel was leveling, was only done through diplomacy and only done through negotiations and only done through backing off from this belligerent acts. So I think this is where, this is the lessons that should be learned, not just by Israel, but any country that thinks that through its power and through its ability to evade international law and international norms, that the result is negative. The result is actually you are in a less powerful position. And I have to mention here, there's a simple rule. The more force you use, the less powerful you are. You know, as a parent, I know this rule very well. So it is when my kids listen to me, just by saying something, then that means I'm the most powerful. But when I resort to punishment and resort to aggressive means and coercive means, that means I have no power, and I've lacked a bit of respect in the eyes of, family situation or otherwise. It's a very important rule that we have to also think about.
No, absolutely, and I like very much what you said, and I want to pass it on to Dr. Shirgholami. To really also at all times think about what can you do, what can I do, what can we do in filling up the glass and adding some drops, really thinking a bit about the think tank level maybe, Dr. Shirgholami. What can think tanks both here in Iran, in the Middle East, in the Global South, in Europe do to help strengthening diplomatic approaches? What would your suggestions be? And unfortunately, in the interest of time, we have to be a bit quicker now, but what would your ideas be of what this agency, Dr. Manal, is talking about, to try and help international law back on its feet through diplomacy? What can we all do?
We are living in a situation of chaos. That's the reality on the ground. And the fact that the policy makers and decision makers in many countries, especially those countries who have been by self-proclamation the founders of the international norms and regulations, are the very first violators of the same principles. This is really a very turning point in the history of the human being, that we need to decide what we are gonna take as the next approach vis-a-vis, what has been the very foundations of the life of the human being for many years and for many decades after the World War II. I mean the normative structure of international system. This is very critical moment, and we see that the United States, perceiving itself as the hegemon, even does not obey the same rules that the hegemon should adhere. This is the situation that you see after the aggression against Iran. What has been the reaction of those countries who are claiming that we are the normative powers? This is the real situation, and if this line of policy gonna continue in future, nobody could feel immune of the negative implications of the situation. So we need some sort of alert in the side of everybody.
Yeah.
Those countries who have the responsibility to be adhering to the norms and principles, who have been claiming that we are the founders of those principles, and now they are revisionist countries. Revisionism is very interesting concept now, because of the fact that for many years they have been accusing others that those countries are revisionist countries. Why? Because we don't like their behaviors, we don't like their line of policies. Now the United States is the very first revisionist of international system. This is really a miserable fact, and the fact that the other countries, well mentioned by some other the panelists, those European countries who are gonna, let's say, be supposed to be pro-international law, pro-international norms, and to be normative powers, as they have been claiming for many decades, they are continuing with the same line that the United States, as the hegemon, has adopted. And just an instance, you can take a look to what happened with regard to the snapback. A snapback, they knew that they have a leverage, and they were thinking that we need to use it or lose it. it was totally a political approach, not a legal approach. They didn't have the legal right to go for the snapback, but they did. So this is the real situation, very shaking situation of the international system, and everybody has a responsibility. And the think tanks and scholars, they have also a great responsibility to provide the decision makers and politicians with the good advice that if you're going to continue this line of policy, there will be a total chaos international system and nobody can stop this.
Yeah. Okay, so basically calling on everyone to re-emphasize the importance. Your Excellency, Mr. Katrougalos, it will have to be a bit brief, but I have to ask you this question about the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. Again, on the one hand, it has been prominently discussed like never before. That could strengthen its role, that could bolster its importance. At the same time, it is disrespected and ignored. How would you assess it? How can this entity be strengthened, consolidated in its importance?
First of all, we must have in mind that, as Mrs. Redhwan said, we have an obligation to fill the glass. But for us, individuals, this is a moral obligation. States have a legal obligation, not just political, to respect international law. I'm coming right away to your question about ICC. But before that, we had the important opinion of the International Court of Justice, the supreme judicial organ of the United Nations, on the illegality of the occupation by Israel of the Palestinian territories. So it is not just the genocide, it is not just the war crimes. Occupation by itself, it is illegal. And for this reason, all states, especially European states, because we claim that we are defending international law and values, should impose sanctions to Israel. It is a real joke imposing draconian sanctions to Russia and not at all sanctions to Israel. The same double standards game plays also in relation to the ICC. The General Prosecutor has said that he has been approached by American officials, very probably by an American senator, and he was told, "What are you doing with Israel? Don't you know that ICC is just for Africa and for thugs like Putin?" Mr. Dupont was very right to say that we had a very clear distinction regarding what the European Union is doing now and what France, Germany have done during the second Iraqi war. It goes beyond that. The German Chancellor dared to say that Israel is doing the dirty job for us by bombarding Iran. So it is clear for me that this is the lowest moment of European political history. Our leaders are quite far away from the interests of our citizens. It is not a matter of expertise. Sometimes the experts are just expressing with eloquence the interests of the powerful. We see clearly a huge lack of trust rising in the European societies. Brexit, the rise of the extreme right, are signs of this lack of trust. And this also has its image on the foreign policy of the European Union. In a moment that European Union should try to become an independent pole in the multipolar world, we are becoming more subservient to the United States than ever. So it is clear that we should defend legality. I'm repeating, this is not just a moral or political obligation, it is a legal obligation for the states, and something that all citizens should demand from their leaderships.
Thank you so much. And I really want to come back to this discussion about morals and values. Monsieur Dupont, we are obviously demanding states to act upon morals and values, but at the same time, we are not naive. We know that interests are the thing that drives states. How can we reconcile values and interests? And should it be in the interest of a state to have value-based policy, or is that just romantic thinking?
Actually, the situation we are facing is a situation where an alternative to international law, as we know it, is being promoted mainly by the United States and by some of its Western allies, under the heading of the rules-based order, which basically has been analyzed as I said, an alternative to international law, allowing for selective application of rules of international law in line of the national interests of some states. In that situation, what matters is to revive I think the existing international legal framework as was created by the founders of the United Nations, and to revive the current collective security system based on the UN Charter in particular. Doing so entails from states, defending the application of treaties, irrespective of the particular situation that can be witnessed. It is in effect striking to see the difference in approach between the current conflict in the Ukraine and other situations. The condemnation that the Russian intervention in Ukraine has attracted is in stark contrast with the positions expressed by European diplomacies vis-à-vis the conduct of the Israeli regime in Gaza, for instance. And in order to revive international order as we know it, states should be encouraged, especially in international fora, especially during discussions at the General Assembly and in relevant international bodies, to protest time and again against each and every violations of international humanitarian law, of the current prohibition on the use of force, and on other fundamental rules upon which the current international legal order is based.
Yeah.
And if only because, as has been said previously, there is no alternative to that. There is no other legal regime that has obtained the consent of all states. So we have no choice.
No, thank you. Absolutely, there is no choice. And Dottora Margeletti, can I ask you?
Ask you wherever you like.
Sorry?
You can ask you wherever you like.
Okay, that's good. I should have known that earlier. But so the trends in Europe, politically, increasingly towards the right, is this the beginning of the story, or will we at some point see a pendulum? And does a shift to the right necessarily mean a shift towards more war-driven mindsets, militaristic rhetoric, or is this too doomy a picture? Aren't things as bad as we may think?
Okay, thank you. A very good question. First of all, we are discussing today about the weakness of UN. But I want to inform you, my friends, this wake-up calling is not of today.
I have to leave now.
The UN started to become weaker and weaker in the middle of the 90s, 30 years ago. And not neither in Middle East, but in Africa, where the blue helmet in Eastern Africa, in Central Africa, saw people murders and remain in this way. Happened in the Balkans, where UN forces saw massacre, genocide, and do nothing. So, in reality, countries acted on their own because they recognized that the UN weren't able to stop the genocide. So the failure of UN is a failure of everyone in this room. All of us are sinners, because all of us, in some sense, all of us in terms, not personally, obviously, make a contribution to reduce the level of engagement of UN in the foreign affairs arena. And let me tell you, foreign affairs is a dirty job. Secondly, regarding your very sharp question, we don't have in Europe any militarized idea of a world. We are, unluckily for us, we are trying to change our mind, because for many years our mind was peace and money, money and peace, peace and money and so on. So now we are obliged by someone else, that is Putin, that is doing, as continue to do, an illegal invasion of a sovereign country, and is a matter of fact. And we have to defend, or at least to prepare an effective deterrence. Mm-hmm. But what my country, what my government said was that what the Israeli government did in Gaza was absolutely against any justification. Yes. Because every country, your country, my country, every country.
You can continue, Dottore.
No, it's a matter of courtesy. Yeah. It's a matter of courtesy.
No, because I also have to leave soon, so I can mention now that you have. Can the colleagues from the press kindly wait for a later opportunity?
Okay. So every country has the right to defend, but no country has the right to revenge. That's something different.
Yes.
But two last points. First of all, I listen clearly many times to discuss what Israel did in Gaza, and my personal opinion is what Israelis did in Gaza is against the humanity.
Dottore, I have to interrupt for a quick second. Dr. Manal has an appointment she has to go to right now, so she will leave us. No, you can continue, but for the moment, Dottore, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. I apologize.
And sorry for the delays that we had.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Dottore, excuse me.
I said, no problem. I said that what the Israeli government did in Gaza is a personal opinion, is against humanity. But please, don't forget what happened on the 7th of October. Because we discussed what a government did against humanity, but no one speaks what Hamas, that is a terrorist organization, did in Israel. Unless we lost the point, because as I said in my first intervention, international laws is for everyone, not only for the people that we like. And the second point, you have many ways to destroy international laws and international relations. Many ways. As you have many ways to break the glass.
Sure.
By accident or by breaking with a hammer. One of the ways is, you discussed many times, is to bomb another country.
Yeah.
But please remember that there are other ways. For example, if someone provided targeting data to a terrorist organization to launch missiles against merchant ships and innocent sailors, this is another way. So first of all, we must recognize each and every one, that we have to sit around at the table and start to speak
Yes.
towards the future, unless we will continue to say, you are wrong, I am right, they are wrong, and I am right.
Yeah, so in fact, safeguarding international law is an obligation for everyone.
For everyone.
For everyone. I want to conclude this panel by coming to Monsieur Cassard one more time, and we unfortunately won't have time for the Q&A. Monsieur Cassard, the one thing I wanted to ask you is, with the difficulties and the dangers humanitarian aid workers faced, how can you and how would you still encourage people who have their moral compass right to join humanitarian work, given all the dangers that are upon them? What would be your key encouragement to them in light of all the dangers that exist?
Thank you. It's exactly the point I wanted to conclude on. We have seen, and I will be brief, we have seen, we have described and mentioned a high level of violence in recent conflicts. And if you see what happened, for example, in June in Iran, during these conflicts, among the different victims, 5 rescue workers from the Iranian Red Crescent Society were killed while they were fulfilling their duty. And obviously, health workers, humanitarian workers should not be targeted. And from there, obviously, it's another shocking element of the consequences of the violence of the conflict. But what I think is important here is that you see it in Iran, but you see it in Palestine. You see the courage of Palestinian Red Crescent workers in Gaza, and there's been many victims among them. There is a common value on humanity. There is a common aspiration toward humanity that is coming from every generation, including the young one. So for me, it's in a way, these deaths or these victims are a strong push, a kick for a strong political commitment to restore respect for international humanitarian law. And I promise to be brief, so I stop
No,
here.
thank you so much. And I want to kindly ask you to applaud our panel for their remarks. I'm very sorry that I had to rush you through this conversation, but I hope you all got a good idea of where the glass is half empty and where it is half full. Thank you, and please enjoy the rest of the conference. خیلی متشکرم. ممنونم از شما. مرسی دیگه با اجازه شما. Thank you.